On June 6, 2017, the SDF began their push to liberate Raqqa. This multi-religious and multi-ethnic alliance of Kurds, Arabs, Assyrians, Yazidis, Armenians, and Turkmen, which also includes female fighters and commanders, overpowered an entrenched enemy and demonstrated courage and tenacity in the face of significant losses. Raqqa was liberated on October 20th. The false governance structures of Daesh were removed for good, and the weakness of their military strength exposed. Many SDF soldiers were wounded and killed for their efforts, and we honor the sacrifices that led to their victory. And so throughout the fight, there have been over 1,200 friendly KIA of SDF forces. Specific to Raqqa, there were approximately 434. Wounded throughout the fight in northeast Syria for the SDF is a little bit greater than 2,500. And for Raqqa specifically, approximately 905. So a significant loss to both Kurds and Arabs fighting together to rid northeast Syria of the evil of Daesh. And they are, the SDF, both Arabs, Kurds, Armenians, all of them continue to honor them in their sacrifice. And the world owes them a significant debt for all that they've done to help us rid the world of this evil. The coalition support to Raqqa continues with a whole of government effort, including our partners at Department of State and USAID. We are all supporting the Raqqa Civil Council, or RCC, the local governing body, who is working to stabilize the city that Daesh destroyed. The Raqqa Internal Security Force, or RISF, is an indigenous partner force established to provide local security and prevent Daesh's reemergence. The RISF answers to the RCC and continues to grow in size and will, at some point in the near future, assume control of the city from the SDF. For the people of Raqqa at the moment, it is still unsafe for them to return home. Although the city is void of Daesh fighters, hundreds and maybe even thousands of Daesh improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, bombs, and booby traps remain. Sadly, civilian deaths have already been reported among some of those who have tried to return. The loss of Raqqa was a major blow to Daesh and exposed the lies, cowardice, and evil in the Daesh ideology. Yet these terrorists still exist. Together, the coalition will continue our support to the SDF as they liberate the remainder of areas along the Euphrates River to the border with Iraq. Daesh has no capital and no physical caliphate. Daesh is running out of places to hide. Daesh terrorists are running away from our partners and the coalition. Their leaders are in hiding. Raqqa was freed by Syrians. Raqqa will be secured by Syrians. Raqqa will be governed by Syrians. And the second data point I will give you is that there are hundreds and thousands of Arabs that are fleeing from around the Euphrates River Valley, from Dar es-Zawr to Mayadin to down around Al-Qaim, and they are fleeing, they're fleeing Daesh, they're fleeing the regime liberation of those cities, and they're not going south into Arab-controlled territories. They're going north into the SDF-controlled territories. And so that tells me that they understand the risk of both and that they would much rather be in the SDF-controlled territories. And
having the Syrian regime pushing towards the Bukamal area, backed by the Russians, and at the same time we have the Iraqi security forces with the PMF conducting operations surrounding the Al-Qaim and the Khabur areas. How likely you think Iran would be able to control the Iraqi-Syrian border, especially in that area? the Bukamal Al-Qaim area?
I do not think that there will be any Iranian control of the border from inside of Iraq. I do think that there is that potential in Syria, but that is a question for the Syrian regime, and I do not have good information and am not able to answer that question in sufficient detail that I think would satisfy you.
You had mentioned before how well the Kurdish members of the SDF are working with the Arab members. In addition, it seems like coalition has worked well with Kurdish Peshmerga in Iraq. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what it is about the Kurdish that have been so effective and what has made them good partners in the fight against ISIS.
And I think that, first of all, they have an indomitable will. They were backed up in Kobani several years ago, and Daesh almost overran their position in Kobani. And I think a small group of them got together and agreed with each other. They were not going to let this happen to them or the people or the territory, the historical Kurdish area. And they decided that they were going to defeat Daesh. And ever since then, they have been ferocious fighters and excellent leaders and pretty amazing tacticians as they have methodically taken back their terrain from Daesh.
You said that you don't have concern about kind of breaks within the SDF because the Arab component and the Kurdish component of the SDF are currently working very closely. But we saw the same thing in Iraq. The Peshmerga and the Iraqi security forces were working very closely together, very coordinated. They took over Mosul. Peshmerga enabled the liberation of Mosul to a great extent, and now we see that these two forces are fighting each other. So what else do you have other than just your confidence or your just trust in the cooperation currently going on the ground that these two groups within SDF, the Arabs and Kurds, would not take on each other?
Yes, so thank you very much for that question. Again, I think I mentioned earlier, so right now, Daesh has, the evil of Daesh has coalesced these groups, both Arabs, Kurds, both in Iraq and Syria, to fight together and work together. And I think that the relationships that they've developed over the years in this fight will bode well for the future. As I mentioned earlier, I have had the opportunity to meet the commander that was in Raqqa, and he was Arab. I have witnessed the effectiveness of that force, and they continue to be effective all the way down the Euphrates River Valley. Also in Iraq, I was fortunate enough to be at the meeting where the Kurds and the senior leaders and the Kurds and the senior government of Iraq military officials met. And I can tell you that I will leave it to the government of Iraq to talk to you about the specifics and the results of those discussions. But I think all Iraqis, both Kurds and Arabs, can be very proud of the professionalism and compassion and commitment of General Uthman, the Chief of Defense, and Minister Sinjari, the Minister of the Pesh, and the character and wisdom that they displayed throughout those discussions over 2 days to work very hard to come to an agreement that would limit any more Iraqis fighting Iraqis. And that agreement has held for a few days here, and I think we have great optimism that it will continue to hold into the future.
And then, as you have worked with SDF so closely, can you acknowledge or have you seen any kind of trace that the YPG, a significant component of SDF, has ideological connections with PKK?
Obviously, that is a concern for many folks, but I have seen no connection between the SDF and the PKK, and we have worked very closely with them for over 2 years. And so we have not seen any evidence of that. Obviously, the United States does not support any terrorist organizations, and so we continue to support the SDF because we have not seen any connection to any terrorist organization.
You said you have seen no evidence, but when during the liberation of Raqqa, the YPG displayed the Öcalan's pictures, the PKK leader, and also dedicated the liberation of Raqqa to the PKK leader. Isn't that an evidence for you to consider that there is a connection between, or ideological connection between YPG and the PKK?
I do not think you're speaking about the formal press conference from SDF leaders and RCC leaders that declared the liberation of Raqqa. During that ceremony, I do not think there was any reference to any terrorist organization or terrorist leaders. While we are aware of some symbols of divisiveness, both in Syria and have been displayed in Iraq in the past, we do not support those, and we do not believe that either the government of Iraq or the senior SDF leadership sanctioned those divisive the display of those symbols.
One last question. According to a mutual agreement between the coalition and Turkey, the YPG component of SDF would leave Manbij. But according to the Turkish military sources, the YPG elements have not left Manbij yet. Do you have anything to share with us why they have not left yet, and why are they there? What is the reason?
What I can tell you about our relationship with Turkey and especially the military, the TGS, the Turkish military, is that we have a very transparent relationship with them. We communicate with them routinely about all that we're doing in our campaign and our relationship with the SDF. And we have communicated at those levels, and they understand exactly what truth is, and so we've expressed it in those channels, and I feel comfortable that they're satisfied with those responses.
Give a sense of has it changed any plans for future, training mission, the hold mission, as you shift from those counter assault days to hold and stability ops going forward, especially within Iraq?
We are continuing to determine what that posture will be. Obviously, we will be here. Whatever the size of the coalition presence will be here at the request of the government of Iraq, and we plan to continue all of the key partnerships. Some of those partnerships are with PESH. Most of them are with the Iraqi security forces. But we are continuing the deliberations and the planning efforts to determine exactly what level will remain and who those key partners will be. And so right now it's a little too early to say definitively, but we do anticipate continuing the relationships with some of the PESH forces.
How concerned are you between the increased reports of fighting between Iraqi security forces and the Kurds?
Well, a couple of different pieces to that. The first one is that there's still Daesh left in Iraq. And all security forces here, the PESH and the Iraqi security forces, are all focused on eliminating that threat. And then once that is done, I think that we collectively will continue to develop and train and advise and assist various partner forces as they reset from the struggle that they've had with Daesh over the years. And I do not, as I said, I was at the meeting here over the weekend, and the leadership that was displayed on both sides, from the PESH leaders and from the Iraqi security force leaders, gives me great optimism that there's a very low chance of any continued conflict internally within Iraq.
Sir, is it possible of the ISIS fighters who surrendered, what's happened to them?
A lot of those continue to be detained by the SDF in their facilities in northeast Syria. And so a lot of those that were captured that were local Syrians, have been turned over to their tribal leadership underneath their control. I can tell you from experience, from driving around, that the security there provided by the local civil councils and the internal security forces is such that it is a very low threat of any Daesh attacks or any Daesh period in northeast Syria.
Are your troops going to be positioned at the border crossings alongside the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga?
If the government of Iraq and the Iraqi security forces and the leadership in the Pesh would like us to be there, then we will take that into consideration, and we will potentially do that. But that will be at the invitation of the government of Iraq.
The Shia militia leader Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, he said in an interview with Associated Press yesterday, and I'm quoting, Iran was the only country that supported Iraq from the beginning of the Daesh crisis, unquote. And before that, a couple of days ago, during a conference in Baghdad, Hadi al-Amri, the Badr militia leader, said, quote, Iran is the one that helped on the ground in Iraq and not the international coalition, unquote. What is your response to that?
I think that the government of Iraq has definitely understands the commitment that the United States and the entire coalition has made to help them as they have worked very, very diligently and very effectively to rid Iraq of the evil of Daesh.
Do you have any updated estimates on how many ISIS fighters are left in Syria and in Iraq?
But you could throw anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000 Daesh that are left throughout the Euphrates River Valley, from up around Dar es-Zawar all the way down to Al-Qaim in Iraq.
How is the American ISIS fighter going to be prosecuted?
Thank you for that question. And that is not a military, I do not have a military answer to that question. That is a Department of State and Department of Justice problem, and they're working to sort that out. And I am not aware of the answer right now. So.
Okay, thank you, sir, and thank you, everybody.